Are in listen-only mode.
Oh, good morning and a huge welcome to Understanding and Handling Relapse and Setbacks in Your Recovery with me, Elaine Wilkins. Before we get into our webinar this morning, a huge welcome to, we have some new recoverers joining us today. So delighted that it's your very first live webinar. And just for those that are new to the webinar scenario, if we can just check, you should have a little hand icon on your dashboard. If you can have a little look. If you're like me, you probably need to do a bit of searching. I'm not terribly technical. So if you can find a little hand icon and click on it, I can tell that you can hear and see everything okay. That's excellent. So the hands are going up now. If you try to click on your hand and it's not working terribly well, technology sometimes does that, then we do have a question box there too. And this is really an opportunity for you to get your questions answered today for those of you that are going through the recovery program. I think we do have some guests joining us today to look at the type of work that we do within the Chrysalis effect. So welcome to you too. And we've also got some wonderful Chrysalis effect practitioners joining us today to grow their learning and their understanding of what you're going through as part of your recovery. And we have some great experts joining us, our senior practitioners, to share their wisdom with us as well today, so to field questions that I can't answer, that are outside my expertise. So we will endeavour to answer all the questions that we possibly can. If anything's asked that really needs to be fielded out to one of our other team members that isn't with us today, then what we promise to do is make sure that we contact that person and get that question answered for you. So that's our pledge to you today. And let's just have a look at what we're going to be covering. So firstly, we're going to be looking at what causes relapse, and also we're going to be looking at the different aspects of what causes relapse, and also what creates relapse to persist. So I'm delighted to be introducing Diana Powley, who's with us today, not only fully recovered herself, but a real expert in the field, and I'm very proud to have her as part of our senior team, so she'll be with us later. And then we have another one of our experts joining us today, our international specialist, senior specialist, Emma Chapman-Sharp, who I've just got to keep my eye and hope that she can join us. She's seeing a client as we speak, and she's coming on to deliver some very, very interesting information around the biochemistry of relapse, because once you understand what's going on biochemically in your body, then it helps you to understand and be more patient when we have those unexplained or mystery relapses, when we think we're really doing well in the recovery and then that happens. And I'll tell you a little bit about when I had my final relapse back in 2006, which was absolutely horrendous and scary, and I didn't understand any of what you're going to learn today. So that's why we like to get this information to you as soon as possible in your recovery process, so that you can relax and focus on all those things that we support you to do and in recovery, rather than laying there worrying yourself silly about what is actually going on. So I believe that education and information is the key to recovery, and so that's what we're dedicated to doing today. We're going to also be looking at the other factors that you might not have even considered that can precipitate a relapse. And we are going to help you to get to know your relapse ID. What are those things unique to you that can tip you over into a really poorly state when perhaps you've been making good progress? We want to help you to end the cycle of relapse. Now, when we look at the next slide, I'll explain to you that relapse is part of your recovery. It's normal, but you do want to get to a point, of course, where it doesn't happen anymore. One of the ways that we do that is to look at how we create our own unique wellbeing ID, and every single person that's recovered will have done that. And it's always fascinating to me when I talk to people that are now fully recovered, people going through the program, how those wellbeing IDs actually are quite similar. You'll see the similar themes coming in time and time again. So put your seatbelts on, because I really think that this is going to be a phenomenal turning point for many of you in your recovery journey. And then I've got some information on help with recovery going forward. So if there's people visiting us today, then we can point you in the right direction for some more support. And then I'm also going to share with you what we're going to be covering on our next webinar. So, what causes relapse? So perhaps you'd like to, I'll just see a show of hands here. How many of you have had one of those relapses when you thought you were doing really well and it just felt absolutely, devastating, and you just couldn't quite pinpoint what had precipitated it? You thought you'd been doing everything right, you'd been following all the advice, yet lots and lots and lots of hands going up. We've got a lot of people on here today, we really have. So I would say something like 80% of the hands have just gone up. So it is one of the most difficult things, because if you don't understand what's going on, then of course our mind will try and make up the difference. And if you're like me, I used to lay there worrying that I had something undiagnosed going on that they hadn't found, and it actually used to incite me to go off and get more tests done. So has anybody had that experience as well? So it's really understandable. So let's start looking at what actually causes relapse. Now, before we go into that, many of you will be familiar with our 6 phases of recovery model, and understanding exactly what to expect in each phase and what's going on is key. But something I wanted to draw your attention to today, because I haven't got time to go into the whys and wherefores of this, but you know that the in-depth detail around the phases 1 to 6 are all in your recovery program, and we put that in right at the beginning so that you know and you can identify yourself where you think you are in this process. But if I just draw your attention to phase 5, phase 5 is where people have started to feel a lot better, because we've done the work and we've got through, and they've worked on phase 4, where they've stopped looking outside of themselves and just doing external practitioner hopping and waiting, hoping that there's, research being done or external cures. We know that with this condition that really a lot of internal searching has to take place, and it's no one specific thing, and it's physical, it's emotional, it's lots of different elements to recovery. But in phase 5, what we see is that people are starting to feel a whole host better. And because of the certain type of people that are predisposed to these conditions, we tend to be people that have been very busy before we've been ill, and very full lives, spinning a lot of plates, perhaps taking on a little bit too much. Then what happens when we start to feel a little bit better and we start to regather our energy is literally we want to make hay while the sun shines, and we want to do too much too soon. And we see that, although that's down there in phase 5, we see that between all the phases. Whenever there's a slight improvement, we often go back to pushing our body too hard in different areas. So let's just see. Looking back, those of you that have been going through your recovery for a while, how many of you can recognize that in yourself, that you just recouped a bit of energy and then find yourself just trying to, because it feels so delicious, doesn't it, to actually be able to feel you can go out or do whatever. So it is really absent. Now what I want to do is just normalize relapse. It has to happen, because what you're learning about is what your body needs, what you need, and where your boundaries and limitations are for your well-being. And when I mean limitations, I mean while you're recovering. When we go on to full recovery, when we've gone through what we're going to go through today, you'll see that it's not about living a limited life in any shape or form. But what we tend to do is we tend to try and go back to doing the very things that led up to and contributed to our health crash in the first place. So what we always say to people is we welcome those relapses, because what we want to look for is the message in the relapse. What precipitated it and what caused it? And Emma's going to be joining us later to explain to you, because one of the biggest problems with identifying what causes relapse is there is a delay factor. So you can't always link what has caused your relapse to what you've just done the day before. So hopefully by the time we finish today, you're going to have real reassurance around the fact that relapse is just part of the learning process. It's absolutely normal. I've never known anyone recover who hasn't been through it. And what we want to do is get to the point where they are much shorter than they were before, and and have the tools to do exactly what you need to do to stop another one coming into your life. So that's where we are. So I can see that people have already been hungrily putting questions in there. So I'm going to be reading those while the experts are talking, and then I can field those questions to the appropriate one. So we know, and this is, my quote here, and I can't tell you how many times I say this when in talks and various articles, whatever I'm doing, but in my 16 years of experience and research, for people to recover fully and achieve long-term well-being, without exception, all of these 8 areas need to be addressed systematically and holistically. And you don't get there unless you do. So if you're trying to shortcut it, or there's an area that you're just not quite ready to deal with right now, then that will be the areas that you resist are what cause the symptoms to persist. And I've yet to be proven wrong on this. I really have. And it wasn't just something that we made up. It came out of interviewing people that not had just got over their symptoms, but were vital and vibrant and well and healthy and had sustained health. And I'm talking about sustaining long-term well-being, because we do have people come to us who have recovered a few years ago, and then they go back to doing a lot of things that aren't serving them and aren't right for them. And guess what? The symptoms will reappear. So there was something in that first recovery that they didn't address. So what we know is that it is a case of peeling away the layers. So these are some questions that I'd like to ask you before we go any further. Now, on other webinars, we've dealt very much in depth with the type of person that succumbs to these conditions. And what we know is that we are highly sensitive, both in sort of emotionally and constitutionally and environmentally. So that's something that you'd probably, if you haven't gone into that yet, you really do need to investigate that, because once you recognize that externally, that looking externally strong but feeling internally sensitive, and then that's a real key part of understanding what you need to recover. So this is a question for you. What does my highly sensitive self really crave? So maybe you could jot these questions down and you could work on them when we've finished today. Or maybe you might have an insight immediately and you might want to type it in. So that's the first thing. The second one is, what is compromised physically for you? So what area physically? We've got movement on that wheel, and we've got thyroid and adrenals, and we've got our nutrition, all the things that address our physical well-being. So what is compromised physically? What is not working environmentally? So are you living somewhere or trying to go to a job somewhere where it just doesn't feel right? Often that square peg in a round hole thing is really important in our recovery. And this is the real big question, and it's the one that is often the most difficult to address. What does not feel right emotionally? And these are the sorts of things we want you to start thinking about. What doesn't feel right emotionally? And we'll build on that a little bit later on. And this is the one, and I really believe that for every single person that succumbs to these conditions, be it ME, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, which by the way we see as just a label, that there is something that you almost don't want to come up into your mind to admit to. So what is it that you need to let go of in your life, but you dare not say it aloud? And I remember the day when I said it aloud, and it was just so painful. And I can remember sitting there crying and really having, it was almost felt like to me as if I was admitting defeat. But you know what? When I let go of a business that I'd worked years to build up, I'd kept telling myself I couldn't let go of it. I couldn't stop. I couldn't, for all various reasons, security, finance, all those things. When I actually said it needs to go, and we need to sell our home because I cannot sustain this level of pressure and stress anymore, I cried and cried, but actually making that decision was the most massive relief ever. And, relief is the best emotion to feel in the world. I always say that to people, what do you feel when you let that go? And they say relieved, and you know that you're there. So these questions are going to be key to you getting clues about what needs to be addressed and what you are going to be working on. Even if you don't feel strong enough quite now, it will happen. And that last question, when I speak to Diana in a moment, you'll be absolutely amazed of what she needed to let go of, but dare not say aloud. But she did it, and the rest is history. She's in phenomenal health now. So let me introduce you to an absolutely wonderful colleague, friend, and fellow recoverer. Met Diana many years ago now, and she's gone on to become one of our lead trainers with the Chrysalis Effect. She worked with us to develop the Chrysalis Effect transformation process because her area of expertise is hypnotherapy, as you see, NLP, timeline therapy. She's worked with post-traumatic stress disorder. She's the most incredible, not just practitioner, but person. And, we're great believer in the Chrysalis Effect that you need to work alongside people that have done what you're trying to do. And Diana had a very, very severe form of ME and has had to work, on her recovery like we all did. And what she found that was absolutely central for her was making sure that she harnessed her mind to work for her recovery rather than against it. And we see it every day in the Chrysalis Effect. Every health profile that comes in, we see how much the mind working against recovery is something we have to definitely get in amongst and get that sorted, because if we can't get that working for you, then unfortunately it's going to hold up recovery. So let me find Diana, and I'm going to unmute her and see if she is with us. Diana, can you hear me?
Hi Elaine, hello everyone.
Oh, fantastic. Welcome, Diana. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy clinic to come and share with us today.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. It's lovely to share, and it's also lovely to learn. There's always something to learn more about. I'm looking forward to listening to Emma later. So, yes, thank you for inviting me.
That's great, Diana. So, as you can see, Diana's contact details are here, and she's part of our team anyway, so you can just contact us and we'll field anything over to her. Diana, firstly, I think it would be great if you started with your own, I know it's a brief recovery story for those that maybe are at the stage in the programme where they haven't got to your wonderful interview where you tell your full story, and maybe for those people that aren't part of our recovery programme yet, to see, what the changes you made in fact to get well. And I know that your story was you really were severely bedbound and wheelchair bound with ME, weren't you?
I was indeed, yes. And I'm sure, like a lot of people listening, I was what do you call it, a type A person, a high flyer, a career girl. I was married, 3 children, then went on to have a series of operations. I actually had 3 general anesthetics in a 6-week period. And then another operation the following year. And I'm sure that, cumulative effect of the anesthetics, there was stress in the marriage. There was non-stop running around with the children. And I really got so fatigued, burnt out, and instead of recovery from the last operation, convalescence, I'm afraid I went down even further. I was not in a supportive relationship, and I ended up with a carer and a wheelchair today, and with a really toxic relationship within the marriage, which I then had to get out from quickly in order to not be committed to a clinic, which is the route my husband was engineering on my behalf. So, the decisions sometimes we have to make, like you were saying, what is it I don't want to give in to thinking about, and one of those, rock and a hard place to leave. I tried for my husband to leave, but he wouldn't, so I had to leave, but to leave was to leave my children because he was not going to let them go with me. And, sometimes we have to make impossible decisions. A mother just does not want to leave her children. And I was so much their parenting that to leave them was so hard, and I left it, you know, a lot longer than I should have. So then a semi-recluse for a while, with just the carer coming in. My husband only let me see the children on a Wednesday evening after school. So, and I was just not strong enough to fight that. So I, you know, hit a very low place. At my weakest, I would crawl up the stairs on my hands and knees. You know, one point I was, my hearing was so sensitive. I wore a little beanie hat with earplugs, and then one of those, what do you call it, the helmet, ear protectors that they wear when they're doing the roads, because my hearing was so sensitive that I could hear my husband shouting at the children downstairs even when I was upstairs in bed. And of course all that was stressful, and you know, when you're so stressed, how can you recover? And I needed to remove myself from that stress and that fear, that I had terrible fear, to the point of pain in my legs when he put the key in the door. So, you know, the mind, the effect of the mind on the body. So combination of physical and mental. But I got out of there and did the thing that I just thought I could never do, was to leave my children. But I just thought, while they're healthy, I'm not going to be able to help them in a clinic, but I will, if I can get myself well. I must get myself well so that I can be back again there for my children. Now, Elaine's kindly put up the thought process of relax. What happens is we need to get the mind working for us, as I was saying. And if you think of the mind as in two parts, outer part is the conscious mind. That's where we logically think, I want to be healthy, I want to be fit. But like me at that time, I had a terrible fear going on against my husband, that what he was going to do to me, because he would be very big and overbearing over me. As I laid down, he would be shouting at me. So it'd be a very different message coming from there, of fear, and, you know, I'll never get better, you know, he'll get me put away, and all sorts of things. You know, I'm on my own, I'm isolated, no one can help me. That's all that was going on. So if 90% is feeling like that, 10% thinking, I want to be healthy, I want to be fit, just hasn't got the strength. It's like David and Goliath. So when I removed myself from the situation, it was very painfully slow, but starting to be in control of my environment. That was the first thing, because as in a flat on my own, away from him potentially coming through the door, I had an extra bolt put on the door, so I knew he couldn't come in. And then the other things followed, the nutrition, but nutrition on its own, if you're in fear, can't work. You know, all these things have, as you've shown, Elaine, beautifully on your circle, everything has to be in place for things to then progress and for you to feel that you can get better. So getting the environment right, the nutrition, the mindset of feeling safe, feeling secure, feeling I deserve to get better, and really feeling motivated to get better was huge for me. But that was probably a couple of years that I was at that point, because I had to get over the fear. And even then, I couldn't bear to be in the area of my ex-husband until after the divorce, when I felt there was no potential control over me anymore. And at that point, I could then feel like I can start afresh. It's like a deep breath, and now I'm in control of me. And maybe I'll take things very slowly, but I can actually start to heal now. So it's quite choking me, really, going back over all that. It was very emotional. But as many of you might know now, I'm very fit and very healthy. And you know, dancing, I go belly dancing every week. And which is, I'm just sort of keeping up a level of fitness. I'm not trying to run any long distances anymore, but one thing you're perhaps aware is my wheelchair to 5K story. I can tell you, Now, it was after the divorce, after I settled into my a new home of my own and feeling safe, feeling secure. But, you know, in the process, I lost a lot of self-confidence. I think when we remove ourselves from society, from, you know, being, if you're living a normal life, if you call it that in quotes, you know, it is quite destructive to the self-confidence, and of course lost a lot of all the friends where he could tell them what a bad person I was. You know, I couldn't be connected to those. I had to be removed from any level of stress. That was so important. But when I got to that point of reducing down to the lowest common denominator of a calm, stress-free, you know, it's perhaps a sort of kind of narrow lifestyle, but thinking I could get to the corner shop, but I couldn't walk around a supermarket, that sort of level. A friend had introduced me to aloe vera. I started on the aloe vera, which was really helpful, and bee pollen for energy. So I started on those. During the end of the marriage, my husband had encouraged the doctor to put me to a psychiatrist, and because I think they had this feeling I was going to commit suicide, and I was put on maximum doses of antidepressants. So it took quite a long time, up to 6 months to a year, to wean myself off those with the help of a nursing friend who became my carer for a few months. She weaned me off those whilst introducing this aloe vera, and the combination of dovetailing one down and the other one up, and the bee pollen really meant that I started to feel some strength coming back into my body and strength coming back into my mind, the combination of the two, and feeling of optimism back into my life. So at that point, I think I saw a 5K run in the September. It was mid-July, and the friend who'd introduced me to the aloe vera, I talked to her, saying, "Do you think I could do 5K?" And she said, "Of course you can." And I'm getting choked again now.
Oh.
And her empathy was so powerful. And she said, "Just pace yourself. Do it within your own time. Even if you walk it, you know, whatever you level, just see if you can. And if you can't. Maybe you're not ready. But if you can, give it a whirl. It can only be good if you're working within what you're capable of." So I set out, and it was actually using these street lamps. So
to measure how far you went.
Yeah. So I thought, you know, all right, today I'll do, you know, perhaps just one street lamp distance, or tomorrow do 2 street lamps.
Lighting the path.
And it was, and I had to remember that I mustn't go too far, because I had to turn around and do it. That was halfway, because I then had to get back home.
Oh,
so that, you know, I was all on my own here, but it was what I felt could be a focus for me. That date of that run, I think it was one in Hyde Park, a women's Flora Light 5K marathon in Hyde Park, and there must have been about 25,000 people there. But each day for that 6 weeks, I did a little bit, and I used to go when I felt the freshest, which for me was first thing in the morning, and I'd only do it. I got to a point. I thought, well, I'll just do it for. Perhaps initially it was for 15 minutes, and then it got built up to 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and I kept it within 30 minutes. I didn't do it any more than that. So I thought of my day's exercise a bit like a bank account, so much put in, budgeting, and I thought if I do too much, I'll just exhaust myself and I can't do anything else for the day. And I often used to have to just go back to bed and lie down after it, just to get myself recovered, and then and eat something nutritious, and then, you know, get on with the day. It might have been resting a lot, and it might some days felt a bit better, but it was very much the pacing myself of the lampposts first, and then the lamppost led me to a nearby cricket ground. So I did a circuit of the cricket ground and then came back. And
so Diana, so in terms of I've seen the photographs. It's a fantastic. It must have been an amazing achievement that day when you sort of, you know, hit that tape and you've done your 5K run. It's absolutely brilliant. But what made you go into the sort of work that you do now, into because I know you see lots and lots of people that are struggling with their mind, which is working against them, and especially when they have a relapse, it just feels so demoralizing, doesn't it? And I can remember it myself.
Absolutely, yes. And then perhaps go back to your circle. Which of those areas isn't right for me at the moment? For me, it was my environment. My husband was an area, I think, of and also the physical, that I'd come through operations. But then I think as time went on and all those other factors were put right, it was then what was in my mind, some old stuff.
Yeah.
And what I saw for myself and what I often see with clients, what's the relationship? What was the relationship with your mother? And so often that's fundamental. I see it time and time again.
Yes,
where
I
there
do
was
too.
functional relationship with the mother. My mother, I was the fourth child. She planned to have 3, and that was enough. Thank you very much. 5 years later, I turned up. She wasn't even maternal, and she didn't hug me. She wasn't. It's just, I'm not, judging her. She was of the Victorian, post-Victorian era of parenting, but I've just felt unwanted, unloved, a nuisance. What am I doing here? And it was, I used to seek attention from who would give, whoever was nice to me. I thought, wow, this is amazing. Someone's hugging me. So these were, this was quite a big deal. And as you go through life, you don't really think about it. You just get on, don't you?
Yes,
until
absolutely.
you get the face of something like this, and
Yeah.
it causes you to actually reflect.
So it absolutely underlines then that, and our next webinar next month, actually, we're going to take this a bit further, because those old unconscious beliefs that will have been established in that relationship where you didn't feel loved and wanted get triggered in your everyday life, don't they? And if we don't deal with that underlying stuff, then what we've got is that accumulated old pain, and that gets triggered over and over again. And I know that the work you do, perhaps you could just, we've got Emma waiting in the wings, so perhaps if you could just spend a minute just explaining how you ensure that old stuff is kind of released through the work you do, and how those nice healthier thoughts can be replaced, so that we're not driving the HPA axis and triggering and that fight and flight threat feeling that happens when we've got this old horrible fear thoughts running.
Exactly. Well, the first thing I would do with the clients is to work on the relaxation. They've got to be able to calm the nervous system down, calm that anxiety, to be able to take some time each day. It must be at least once a day, if not twice a day, to go into that deep space of relaxation. Once they're able to calm and relax, we can then, from that calm space, start to let go of stuff. And we might be using Gestalt, taking that person back to their childhood to release negative, to let go and to actually pour love and reassurance into that little girl that she was. I'm saying little girl, obviously a little boy, if that is appropriate.
Yeah.
To let that and pour that, because I think of it otherwise, it's like building a house on shaky foundations.
Yeah.
You can do what you like to the house, but if the foundations are not right, that house will never be right.
Yeah. And
so the foundations are fundamental to the work that I would do with a sufferer. If we can get that, shore that up, get that feeling of I'm worthy to heal, I'm worthy as a person, that I'm not just here for what I can do for others, but we are human beings, not human doings. And that's a big, big lesson that I think a lot of us have had to learn through the ME, and that's so things like that, that letting go of old paradigms, of old passages that we run our lives by, patterns, records. They're just records.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm as good as what I can do.
Say that again.
So EMDR is another one. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's used for people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and so it could be a trauma, as in a mega trauma, war, conflict, abuse. It can also be small traumas, just a sticking record that won't budge,
Yeah.
and working with releasing that from one part of the mind, because the other part of the mind, like if you think of the two circles as left brain and right brain, the left brain is the logic, the conscious mind. I deserve to be healthy, the positive things, but on the other side, in the subconscious, could be running a record of I'm only as good as what I can do for others, and here I am stuck here in bed.
Yeah.
Then you'll never recover with that record running. So it's releasing that from one and allowing the logic to prevail.
Brilliant. Thank you, Diana. I could listen to you all day, but I'm aware that the time's ticking on and we've got Emma to bring in. So this webinar, I warn you now, is going to run over everybody, but just do as much as you can if you're feeling poorly. It's being recorded and you can catch up with the end, because I just know we're going to be out of time quite quickly, but don't worry. But I think it's such an important one that we need to go through everything. Diana, I'm going to come back to you a bit later, if I may, because there'll be some questions coming in. So I'm just going to say thank you for now. And can you stay on for questions?
Yes, delighted to help.
Fantastic, thank you. That was so powerful, and I'm sure has helped lots of people. There's lots of thanks coming in here. Exactly. So, and interestingly, Kirsty's saying, my mum's the same, tell me about it. I had exactly the same experience. I was the fourth of 4 children, and my mum revels in telling everybody how she went to the family planning clinic after she'd had the 3rd and said she definitely didn't want any more. And then they sent her away and said, 4's the perfect family, Mrs. Kelly. And she then tells everybody how then she had to get used to the fact that she was pregnant with me. And then I was a massive disappointment because I turned out to be another girl. So, all this stuff said aloud, and, it's still to this day doesn't trigger me in the same way, but it's not good. And I've called her on it now. So I think, Diana, you're absolutely right. I think, that old sort of attachment issue to your primary carer, your mum or whatever, can be really buried so deep you don't know that it's storing up problems for your health in the future. Helen's saying her mum told us she would have preferred puppies. So, is it great when we discuss this stuff that you feel that you can say aloud, and you're not alone? It's not you. It's just, unfortunately, that the people that said those things to you didn't think about, the impact that what their words were actually having on you. So that slide there is about the critical faculty barrier, which I can never say. And hopefully that's given you some sort of understanding. So that's just back to me now, and we'll come back to Diana if there's any questions. So I just want to flag up that we have some recovery sessions that explain a little bit more about the HPA axis and some of the things that Diana's mentioned so far. So we've got recovery program sessions 9, 15, 23 and 39. And also there's the members area. If you haven't seen it, there's the great webinar, the HPA axis and recovery. So you can see here that the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system that Diana alluded to affects every single part of your physical body, and that's why the mind and the work that you need to do in terms of getting that parasympathetic nervous system coming in properly is of absolute key importance, because if you're laying there in an anxious state, your body's being affected, every organ is being affected. Okay, so again, to help you, we've got our new program launching later on, and we've got new recovery stories that we're adding, and every single session has a great recovery story. So check out, if you're new and you haven't checked out these people's recovery stories in the members area. You have Liz Sandberg, Catherine Fisher, Amanda's on today, I think. I haven't seen if any of the others are on, and Kim Bromley. We've got some really great stories in there, and I think you'll see that the similar themes we've already talked about will be coming up over and over again, and you'll see that, you know, recovery is no mystery. It's just a recovery, it's a process we all have to go on and understand, and we'll look at your own unique stress IDs and relapse IDs and things as well, so that you know. So I had a question come in here from Lucy, and she can't attend today, so we said that we'd answer it on here for her. So what she's saying is, from a lot of the reading that she's done, it suggests that when you have a setback, you try and reduce the exercise you have been doing to as little as possible. I had a setback in early January, and even by reducing the exercise, I found I have still deteriorated further and further over a period of 3 months, and unable to build my exercise back up. So she gives the figures there of what she was able to do, 2 times 15 minutes for over a month in December. She's been plotting all of this, and I'm also aware that my body is deconditioning further by inactivity. So she's really worrying about the fact that her muscle is, you know, her body is going into a deconditioned state. So how is it possible to balance and not deconditioning the body further by getting some exercise and recovering from a setback? That's the first question. And then when you've had a setback, what's the best thing to do to prevent further deterioration and feel like you're starting again from the beginning? Again, that's the mind will start to really make you feel bad about having a setback. And after a setback and deterioration, she finds it takes a lot less to cause one for her. And then she starts mentioning that she, after a 1 hour visit, she needs a day to recover. And now, after half an hour visit, I need 3 days or more to recover. So what I would say, Lucy, is obviously you've now heard what Diana said about how she gradually built up. But what is jumping off the page to me is that the books that you've been reading about developing your rebuilding your stamina are focusing on rebuilding stamina, and you cannot recover in isolation just around exercise and rest. It has to be addressing all those other things. And the big clue for me here is that I don't know what the 1 hour visits are, but whatever those visits are, I would be wanting to ask questions around what is draining you in those visits that you're needing to take on a day or 2 days or whatever to recover. So in terms of what might be going on biochemically, we're going to look at that now with Emma. And but what I would be wanting to look at is that whole picture. So once we start building that solid foundation, as Diana said, and we start looking at all the areas that need to be addressed, then you're going to be in a much stronger place to start building up that gradual thing. I started walking to the garden gate just like Diana started walking to the end of the road. That's how we do it. Now, for you, and I think you'll love this one, is there is in the webinar members area, go into the movement tab, and you've got understanding relapse and rebuilding physical stamina during recovery, and that's with Julia Pizzakemi, who works with has worked with the Wimbledon tennis stars, and she's an amazing practitioner who understands what it takes. So for those sporty ones of you out there that are really worried about deconditioning and all of that, that's going to be a great webinar for you. I hope that helps, Lucy. So let me now introduce you to another fantastic colleague and friend, Emma Chapman-Sharp. She's an international Chrysalis vet practitioner and nutritionist and naturopath. Now, I was 5.5 months into my recovery when I had a massive relapse, and I'd done all the changes that we've talked about already. I'd moved home, I'd let go of all the stresses in my business, I'd made loads of changes, got my relationships stable and rebuilt bridges, done all of that. But I had a big relapse and I couldn't understand why, and I was in a dreadful state. And it turned out that I had an underactive thyroid that had never been diagnosed, and I also had adrenal fatigue, which I'd never heard of. That had been off my radar. And I went to see a naturopath who helped me, got me the right support, got me on the right program, and I can honestly say within 3 weeks I felt optimistic, which I hadn't felt for ages, and that was the beginning, and that was my final relapse. I never relapsed after that. So if I'd have had that information right at the beginning, it wouldn't have been a 6-year recovery, would it? So that's what drives us here at the Chrysalis Effect, making sure that you have this understanding. So I'd love to now open up the lines, and let's pray that the technology across to Australia, the other side of the world, and see if we can welcome Emma. Emma, are you there? Hello?
Let's try that. Hello, Elaine, can you hear me?
Oh, that made my heart miss a beat, I can tell you. Emma, hi. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, it's lovely to hear your voice, and a big hello to Diana as well.
Yeah, so many of you will be aware of Emma. Emma's an absolute fundamental part of the Chrysalis Effect. She helps so many practitioners. She's part of our training team, amazing practitioner, and the success that she's had working with our clients and helping them through to fly off like the beautiful butterflies that they become is legendary now. So Emma, I know that you've done us some slides to explain to people the biochemistry of relapse, so I know that we're running behind as usual. So can I just get you just to take the floor, and I'm going to just mute myself and leave you to it, and just let me know when you want me to click the slides.
Yeah, that's lovely. All right, so I'm really excited to be on tonight to talk to you all about delayed fatigue, because I think it's one of the most poorly understood aspects to the condition, and it's one of the most frustrating. So hopefully by the end of today's little talk, you'll have a better idea on the physical biochemical reasons why you can feel well one day and then really crash the following day or the day after. Now, the slides we're using tonight, I started off using them to train rooms full of practitioners. What I've found is really important is to actually get this information across to my clients. So I'm really pleased to share it with you tonight, because it makes sense of a lot of aspects of the condition that otherwise are a problem. So Elaine, if you can start me on the first slide. Okay, so we're going to go through just some basic background, and then the good news is we're going to get into some biochemistry. So hands up who loved chemistry at school. I'm sure there's going to be lots of you. I promise to make it easy. So starting from the very basics, we know our energy is made by cells in the body called mitochondria, and their job is to convert glucose from our food into an energy source called ATP. Now, many of you may have heard of ATP. By the end of my talk tonight, you'll know exactly what it is and why it's so important. It only takes one molecule of sugar, of glucose, to provide 36 molecules of energy, or ATP. So, you know, it's the way that our body works. The energy is required for brain function, for heart, for everything. If your mitochondria aren't working properly and your ATP production is slow, then everything in your body slows down. Your cells function more slowly, your metabolism is slower, and everything just starts to run under the way it should. And this is the problem in chronic exhaustive conditions. There is poor mitochondrial function from all sorts of reasons, which we'll go through later, results in a lower production of ATP and poor recycling of APT, and this is why you have your fatigue, right? Deep-seated fatigue that's not better by sleeping or by resting. Okay, now as you all know, this leads to poor stamina. I think we're all fairly clear that stamina is a big issue. Poor energy output or poor energy production, and generally poor cell function. Okay, so I'm going to go through and explain a little bit of why this happens. So if you can go on to the next slide, Elaine. Okay, now here we go. We're starting with the biochemistry. ATP, so this is the energy molecule in the body. It stands for adenosine triphosphate. And I've drawn a little picture here at the bottom. This is a simplified picture of the molecule. You'll see it's got an adenosine molecule in the rectangle, and it's got 3 phosphate groups attached. So that is your adenosine triphosphate, tri meaning 3 phosphates. Okay, so hopefully that's an all right place to start. It'll make sense as we go on to the next slide. Okay, now bear with me and I will explain what all this means. On the left-hand side, you've got your mitochondria in the middle, which requires fuel, which is your glucose from your food, and it requires oxygen. Now, this process happens within the cell, so within the mitochondria, and it's what we call an aerobic system in that it needs oxygen. So, the glucose and the oxygen in the mitochondria produce ATP, which is at the top of the square there, and that is what we just looked at on the preceding slide, the adenosine triphosphate. So, an adenosine with 3 phosphate molecules. Now, in this system, 1 phosphate molecule is broken off, and the release of that, the breaking of that bond, actually produces energy that the body can use. Okay, so the ATP, 1 phosphate molecule is cut off, releasing energy, and what we're left with at the bottom of the square is now ADP. Now, if ATP is triphosphate, has anyone got any ideas of what the D could stand for? It's a diphosphate. So I'll get Elaine to go on to the next slide and I'll show you what I mean. So the triphosphate with the 3 phosphate molecules, 1 has been removed, leaving 2. Okay, so now we've got adenosine diphosphate. And I'm hoping people are managing. I know this is biochemistry. I know it's not always fun. But by the time I put it all together for you, you should hopefully understand why we're doing this. So we're left now with a diphosphate, so adenosine and 2 phosphate molecules. We're going to go to the next slide and see what happens next. All right. Now, the first part of this slide is exactly the same as we saw the last one. So your mitochondria with fuel and oxygen produces ATP at the top. 1 phosphate is removed, producing energy for the body, leaving adenosine diphosphate with the 2 phosphate molecules still attached. One of those phosphate molecules is again sliced off the end, releasing more energy for the body and leaving you with AMP, which is adenosine monophosphate. So you're back to just 1 little phosphate molecule on the end. Now, the AMP is able to be recycled. It can go back through the cell, another phosphate is tapped onto the end and it goes back to form ADP. But it's a very small part of the process. It's very slow. Most of the AMP is lost and excreted. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. It's probably just showing you what the AMP is. Okay, so that's, you would have known what was coming. So that's your adenosine with 1 phosphate molecule left. Okay, now this is looking really confusing, but the bottom half of the slide is exactly what we've just gone through. Okay, and it's the top part that I really want to explain to you now. So if the bottom half of the slide happens within the cell, it's aerobic, it requires oxygen. That is the way that in healthy people they produce their energy. Okay, now I explain to my clients that energy is like a cup, and when you're feeling really healthy, your cup is full, and as you do some exercise or go about your day and the cup starts to lower, the level in the cup goes down, your body uses this system to refill it, and it's constantly replenishing as fast as you move, as fast as you use it. Now on a busy day, by the end of the day, you may have taken quite a bit out of your cup and you're tired, but by sleeping and resting, it refills again and you're good to go the next morning. In chronic exhaustive conditions, this system is not working properly. For whatever reason, your mitochondria is unable to do the ATP to ADP to AMP for conversion and causing energy. Now, the body recognizes that this can occur and it has a backup pathway, because energy is essential. Even if you don't have enough energy to get up off the couch on a day, your body is still using energy to beat the heart and run the brain and do the digestion and all the other things that just go on without us knowing. So this is the system that kicks in when your mitochondria don't work. Now, it's anaerobic. It doesn't require oxygen. It happens outside the cells. You'll see there's glucose. If we look along to the right, glucose is converted to lactic acid, and in the process releases a tiny amount of ATP. Okay, this process is very, very slow. The problem is that lactic acid, you will have heard of before, causes muscle pain. So when you are exhausted and you're not producing energy the way you're supposed to, then the second system kicks into place, but the response is lactic acid. That is what is produced, and that is why you get muscle pain along with your fatigue. Okay, now if you go back to the left where the glucose is, glucose can also, in a separate pathway, be converted to D-ribose, and D-ribose can also help us make ATP. And some of you may be familiar with D-ribose because it's often recommended as part of a treatment protocol for chronic fatigue for solely that reason, because it helps increase your ATP production. Now, I'm hoping I haven't lost you all or confused you all. If we go on to the next slide, please, Elaine. And please, any questions, type them in and Elaine will feed them to me afterwards and I can answer them as best I can. So, we know that someone with chronic fatigue syndrome or ME can be fine one day or reasonably fine one day and then completely wiped out the next. So why is it? What we've just looked at on the preceding slide shows that they have overdone it. They have used too much energy. They are asking more of the body than the mitochondria can keep up with, okay? And it's having to kick into that secondary pathway, which is really slow and causes lactic acid buildup, causing muscle pain. Now, this is why pacing is so important, and I do understand that it's extremely frustrating for an A-type person to be told to pace and to rest, but this is why. You have got to keep your energy output under the threshold so you're not swapping from the good pathway up to the backup pathway. And what I tell my clients, and it's really difficult, I do appreciate that, is that I want them to get to the point where they feel good, feel great, but don't increase their workload or their energy output. So I want them to start feeling good, lying on the couch, lying in bed, doing nothing, and until they can feel good for days and days on end doing nothing, only then can they start to increase their activity. Okay, so I know that's easier said than done, but that's the general idea. You need to feel good doing nothing before you start to ask more of your body. Now, what we need to really be aware of, and this goes back to the question from Lucy, you've got to rest. It's really important. It's not a lack of fitness that is causing this fatigue. It is not a problem with willpower. It's not laziness. It is a problem in the body biochemically. So biochemically, you are unable to produce the energy that you are asking of your body. And to fix it, it's not a matter of pushing yourself more and training. It's a matter of going back to the mitochondria and fixing what's causing the mitochondria not to work properly. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what sort of things can cause damage to the mitochondria. It can be genetic. It can be a toxin of some sort. It can be a neurotoxin. It can be a heavy metal. It could be some sort of a chemical. Nutritional deficiency is really key. A lot of these pathways rely just on simple vitamins and minerals. You know, zinc, magnesium, B6, vitamin D, all of those things are essential. Immune dysfunction, viral and bacterial infections can impact how the mitochondria work. Sleep disorders, if you're not repairing damage done, you're not refilling that cup, your energy is, we know, poorer the next day. Poor cell membrane health, this comes down to essential fatty acids. You need to make sure your diet is really rich in good essential fatty acids because that's what the cell membranes are made up of. And again, we come back to the pacing. A patient not well paced just means they're doing too much. You're asking too much of your body without supporting the mitochondria. Hormonal dysfunction is the other big one. So it can be adrenals, it can be thyroid, it can be the female or male sex hormones. Basically, that whole HPA axis that Elaine was talking about, any part of that, if that's out of balance, it will affect the mitochondria. So a treatment protocol, there are formulations for mitochondrial health, and they can be brilliant, but the real trick to this is to really identify why the mitochondria are not working properly in the first place and fixing it from there so that in time everything starts to work the way that it should. Okay, so that's it for my slides, Elaine. I'm very happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. I'm not sure. Elaine, can you hear me?
It's my fault. I forgot to unmute, to mute. I was muted. I was chatting away and didn't know that you couldn't hear me. Sorry about that. So Trish is saying that she's wearing sunglasses all the time to go on a smartphone and a computer and to watch TV. I'm going to come to that a little bit later, Trish. But it is tied up because the body is in sympathetic dominance, and that will be impacting the adrenals, and it's the sympathetic dominance state where you can't filter out things, so light and noise, like Diana was saying earlier, will be impacting you dramatically. But when we come to contributory factors in a moment, I think you know we're going to look at the definitely the EMFs that you're exposed to. At the moment your body's in too fragile a state to be exposed to that amount for that long. Kate's saying, does stress damage the mitochondria?
Yes, absolutely. When it comes to adrenal function, so the stress impacts adrenal function, and adrenal function, it's like a cycle. Once the adrenals are out, the thyroid tends to go, the female sex hormones or male sex hormones tend to go, and everything collapses. So in my treatment and understanding of chronic fatigue, I think pretty much everything can come back to adrenal function. I think it absolutely is the cornerstone of any treatment protocol.
Yeah, and Trish has also mentioned painful hips and things. So hopefully, Trish, when Emma was explaining about lactic acid, that will explain that one for you. Marian's also asking about inflammation showing up in the equation. So that's where the inflammation comes from, isn't it? It's the lactic acid build-up, isn't it, Emma?
It's in part, absolutely. And there are other things that cause inflammation, especially autoimmune conditions are really common with ME. Where the immune system has become so sensitive that actually it's turning on itself and damaging its own tissues and joints. So that's a big picture that needs to be looked at. But in that same thing, that can be a reason that the mitochondria is being damaged. It's being damaged by an autoimmune condition. Absolutely,
thank you. Gareth is saying taking D-ribose should help, but he's saying has tried for a while without helping. Well, you know, my take on that, I don't know. It's no good in isolation, is it, Emma? And all these things, all these treatment plans, I know that, you know, when you used to work as a nutritional therapist before you worked the holistic way with the Chrysalis effect, there was a difference in the outcome for your clients, wasn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And it took, it was a big eye-opener for me after working, 10 years or more just looking at the physical. When I started working with other Chrysalis effect practitioners who dealt with the emotional alongside what I was doing on the physical, that's when clients really started making leaps and bounds towards recovery. So picking one isolated molecule in the whole system of the body, like D-ribose, and taking a supplement on its own is not going to get you to recovery. It may help as part of a well thought out protocol and as well as looking at all the emotional components, but it's not enough just to pick a single thing out and expect it to be the miracle cure.
No, that's right. So thank you for that. So Rachel's saying, do you treat adrenal fatigue with adrenal glandulars? So I know that you're going to probably...
Here we go.
Many answers to that.
Rachel, adrenals, there are several different ways of treating adrenals. If the adrenals are fatigued, so absolutely sort of worn out and exhausted, and that's not a medical term, that's a naturopathic understanding, then yes, adrenal glandulars can be fantastic if introduced low dose, built up gradually, and obviously they're not suitable for vegetarians. But adrenals can go the opposite way. They can be hyperstimulated and there's too much cortisol produced and people are very highly anxious and very shaky and can't sleep. In that case, then you need things to calm the adrenals rather than build them up. And I find adrenal glandulars are often not tolerated well in that situation.
Great, okay. So finally, Ramona's saying here, so I hope, Ramona, by the time we finish today, that you'll see the whole picture here. But you're saying, wonderful explanation, feel fab when resting in a good phase, but when I need to deal with the normal pace of life where there are necessary deadlines, etc., what is the best thing to take during this time to boost my energy? Because nutrition goes out of the window, can't prepare meals, nor can I digest food properly as the IBS also increases. So Ramona, what we would be doing, giving you, and I know Emma will agree with me here, giving you a suggestion of something to boost your energy when clearly it's actually the pace, the lifestyle and pace we need to look at, and the fact that you aren't preparing meals and that you're not having the right nutrition, then that would be like putting a sticking plaster on something. So what we would be looking at is lifestyle, pace, looking at pressures that you're putting on yourself, and if those deadlines or that job or work that you were doing was actually serving you health-wise. And from what you've said here, it isn't. So we'd be looking at going way below the, what you would take just to sort of boost your energy for doing tasks. And we get, I've had loads of emails like that over the years. I've got an exam coming up, what can you help me to take? So hopefully, by the time we've finished, you'll see that it's your body giving you a very, very clear message that something needs to change externally, not just nutritionally. So Marian's saying, when sleep disorders and reverse sleep cycle occur, is that the result of adrenal fatigue? Absolutely, Marianne. I think, Emma, it was you that taught me that cortisol levels are rising at all the wrong time, aren't they? That's why people are tired and wired and can't sleep.
Yeah, so ideally your cortisol should be high in the morning around 8 a.m. to help you get up and get going for the day. And they fluctuate throughout the day, but they generally lessen. And by the time you go to sleep, your cortisol should be at its lowest point. And unfortunately, in chronic fatigue, there's a reversal of the body clock, and people tend to get a second wind in the evening because their cortisol starts to really pump, and that just absolutely stops sleep.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Emma. These are the same. I just want you to really hear back what you're typing in, folks, because one of the things that I never shrink from in the Chrysalis Effect is total honesty. And so, Kate, thank you for sharing this. She's saying she's been recovering for years. At her worst, she couldn't work for 2.5 years, and last year worked full time for the first time in 7 years in a hospital and difficult environment, and relapsed, burnt out again. I'm wondering why I can't fully recover. Is it because I'll never be able to work 40 hours in a stressful job like others can manage? Why would you want to work 40 hours in a stressful job? That is the point. This is about you finding something that isn't stressful for you. It's finding something that you will absolutely love to do, and it keeps you balanced. Unfortunately, we get into this paradigm where we think work has got to be something we suffer, and everybody that fully recovers and stays recovered actually ends up doing something that makes their heart sing. So Kate, that's going to be life purpose, going to be absolutely key for you. Your body is just this amazing satellite navigation, and when you're putting yourself into an environment that's not suiting you, it is showing you that you need to get out of it, and it's not allowing you to physically do it. It's exactly that. It's as simple as that. So there's loads and loads and loads of questions, and I think really I'm going to have to field them across on email because we're going to be here for the whole morning. Yeah, new industry, so just retrained. Yeah, Kate, you've got millions of options. Please don't tell yourself you haven't got lots of options. You really have. It's just the way we see the world. So as Emma's been explaining, you know, this is a domino effect that she'll often teach us, you know, as part of our program. We teach this model, and you'll see that all those downward spiral in the body. We've got the poor mitochondrial output there, and you know, it's just literally when the certain things that will create relapse and ill health literally create this domino effect down in the body. And now you understand how the mitochondria have got these backup systems that aren't designed to be used for any length of time, which is often why you feel okay for a while, but then you're going to have a crash because it, as Emma said, it takes a long time for those backup systems to recoup. So this is you know, that horrible picture of me when you know, my final relapse was back in 2006. So all these symptoms that I thought I'd pretty much got rid of all came back with vengeance, and it was because there was that missing piece of the puzzle. So this is what it is. And you know, to be honest, those missing pieces of the puzzle aren't a mystery. They fall into those 8 areas that we work with all the time. It's just that just recognizing your own language, what you're telling yourself you can't change or can't do, because that will be the key without a doubt. So I'm just going to go through the final slides here. I love this Jenga slide because that's what it's like, you know. What happens with relapse and what you don't realize is that lots of little things, like if you start going back to eating too much sugar when you've had a healthy diet as part of your recovery, you know, there's lots of little things that could, over a period of a few weeks, create that literally accumulative effect where you will topple over into relapse. And so it's really important for you to know what your relapse ID is. What are the things that make you tip over? So I'm going to go through a few contributory factors. So certain medications that you might have, we're highly sensitive constitutionally, and usually we find that medications can have a very profound impact on our bodies, whereas other people tolerate them quite well. I've never been able to take aspirin because it makes my internal stomach lining bleed. You know, I can't take migraine medication because it makes my it actually gives me angina symptoms and has a really, you know, so a lot of the time it's our personal reaction to medications. It's not that they're all bad, it's just that you're probably very sensitive. Viruses, you know, are a tipping factor, and when your body is at a low ebb and you haven't addressed all those things, then when you do get a virus, it is going to tip you over, and it will take you a lot longer to recover for all the reasons that Emma's explained. Overexposure to EMF, so Trish was mentioning earlier, you know, really your bedroom should not have a computer in it, it shouldn't have a TV in it, and it shouldn't have iPhones in it and Wi-Fi while you're recovering. That needs to be your sanctuary. And the amount of recoverers that we've you know, discussed that with and suggested that with, it changes everything. So you need to be limiting, while you're in this low state, your exposure to these. That's why on our recovery program, although it's computer based, everything's downloadable and printable so that you don't have to sit in front of it for a long period of time. And that's why I'm recommending that if you're in that state and you find yourself having physical symptoms when you're in front of Wi-Fi or computers, then just do things in small measurable amounts. And, you know, even watching this webinar will be perhaps something you're doing 3 or 4 sessions. Long haul flying, people don't realize that travel, it can be, for sensitives, can be a real trauma. It can be really difficult. So that's one of my things that would push me over. It wouldn't push me over on its own, but if there were other things that perhaps my diet hadn't been good, I hadn't been resting enough, I'd been under stress and then took a long haul flight, then I'm going to relapse. Not me now, because I don't relapse now, but people, you know, that are still trying to get well, will find these things. And we've mentioned already too much exercise too soon. I think Diana covered that brilliantly. And things like surgery, you know, the things that happen in life, all of these things will add to that, those tipping points and those accumulatives. So let's have a look at a few more. Kate, here's one for you. This is the ballerina trying to be a car mechanic, you know. So it's really important that you do the right thing in the world that makes you happy, and it's very less stressful to do something you love. The other thing is conflict and resentment. You might deal with it at the time. You might be fine at having a conversation that's difficult, being around people that are quite confrontational, but you are going to have a delayed reaction to that, and it might be 3 days, it might be a week, but you're going to tip over. So foods that are really not great for your particular constitution, perhaps too much wheat is not great for you. It isn't for me. I can tolerate bread now, no problem, but if I have loads of it, I feel yucky. And then if I had other stressors on top of that, I'm going to feel that impact. So, you know, too much sugar, we know, is pure cortisol. It's stress to your body. And alcohol, you know, when you start to feel better, a lot of people will try to have a drink and have a really horrible reaction. Or for me, even now, I love a glass of wine and I love champagne, but I limit it. And if I've got other things going on that are stressors to the body, I lay off the drink, because I get a 3 to 7 day delay, and then I'll feel low in myself, low in my physical body, because I don't process alcohol very well. So these are the things you've got to know about. Family gatherings, you know, your buttons get pushed when you get together with family. Who actually notices that? Who notices that when they've been with their family members? I'll just put the hands down, pop your hands up. If you've been with family members, you might find you cope with it really well at the time, but about a week later or three to 7 days later, you are going to feel wiped. And that is because families don't mean to do it, but they push buttons, and it's the unconscious buttons that Diana was talking about earlier. So, you know, these are the sorts of things that you need to know about yourself, and this is what we need to do. We need to recognize that another part of recovery is understanding the metaphysics, that physical pain and the symptoms that we experience are often easier in a funny way to deal with than facing up to the emotional pain and the changes that we need to make. And Diana has made that really clear today, because look at the horrendous things that she had to face up to in order to get her health back. So her body was literally incapacitating her. You know, she could easily have said to somebody, how can I make these changes? I'm in a wheelchair and I'm ill. But you know what? She knew that she had to face the emotional pain and walk into it and deal with it for her body to be able to recover. So that's something that you probably need support with, but you cannot recover from this unless you walk into that emotional stuff and process it. So another question here on that note is from I think this one's from Helen, I think. I can't quite see down the bottom, but she's saying, how do you cope with grief and loss during recovery? So she's saying that she lost a close family member to cancer and another family member a year ago. And of course, there are many losses that go with the illness: health, job, relationships, etc., which of course you'll know only too well. I know there's no way around grief, only through it, but how can you help yourself in times like this when you feel you're sinking, you don't have the strength to pull yourself up? I think there are others on the programme facing this too. There absolutely are, Helen, and that's, you know, that's the work we do. Jackie Webster is Helen's practitioner, fantastic support. I'm grateful for all I've learned, moving up the emotional ladder. So you're doing all the right work, Helen. It's just going to take some time. And with grief, our specialists are trained in bereavement coaching, but the other type of grief, I think we need to reframe it. Losing your health means that you lose your job. and it means that it impacts relationships, all of those things. But actually, when you start creating your well-being ID, you realize that maybe some of the things that you think you've lost had to be released from your life because actually they weren't right for you. And you know, it's really sad when a relationship ends and when a partner leaves you or a husband or wife leaves you. But when you look back, I know when my first husband left, when you look back, you go, thank God that happened. Because when you're in the relationship, you want to hang on to it. And you don't realize that it's detrimental often and toxic and not good for you. When you look back, when you've rebuilt your life, you think, my God, thank God that person moved on because it was never right. So whatever feels like you're losing it at the moment, it's like Kierkegaard always said, life's lived forward, understood backwards. You know, it's like that tapestry that you can only see at the moment, the knots on the back of the tapestry when you're not well. You can see what's not working and how awful it all seems. But actually, that tapestry, when it gets turned over, you know, you lead a new life, and it's a life that's joyful and serving you. And of course, we all have to deal with loss. It's the hardest thing in the world dealing. I've just lost a dear friend recently, and it knocked me sideways for 2 weeks. It really did. And I think about her every day. But we do have an inimitable human spirit, and getting the right support when we need it, and doing all those healthy things that, you know, allowing the grief, allowing the pain to process and pass through us is the only way. So let's just move on then. And so, yeah, as I mentioned, so life events can be tipping points as well for relapse. So, you know, Christmas and things like that can sound exciting, but I can't tell you how many people find that close proximity to family and all the stress that goes with it, they'll have a delayed reaction. Loss, we've just mentioned. We can't get away from these events. So a part of recovery is learning how to deal with it when you are learning how you as a person need to thrive and be able to handle these things. So even weddings, you know, they sound like lovely events, but how many times does that cause stress in a family? So trapped emotions have to be processed and they have to be released, and you have to be physically stronger in order to do it. So that's why we generally deal with the physical first. That's why practitioners like Emma, naturopaths, our physical practitioners, will normally deal with you first if you're getting one-to-one support, put together that proper recovery program so that you are working through what you need to work through at the right time. And when you're a little bit stronger physically, then it's easier to face up to those changes that are impacting you emotionally. And emotional release is lots of ways to do that. Diana's work through the transformational tapping, EFT, all the sorts of, and also, you know, yoga, all sorts of things that we gotta move our body in order to process and release emotion. And it's a whole other webinar. But that, again, I can guarantee you, if you have pain in your body, if your body feels stuck, it's old emotions that are stuck in your body and blocked. And you got to be open to allowing them to come up and release them. And it's an amazing feeling when they go. And that's why we have to get into the right state. So on that note, getting yourself into the right environment. I love this slide. I'm as happy as a damn, can't think of a good metaphor, a pig in mud. So that's the key, is we got to get yourself to where you love every aspect of your life. And that's what takes the work, because we tell ourselves we can't have it. We tell ourselves we can't. So begin to create your personal well-being ID. Get to know what those stressors are, those things that cause delayed reaction in you. Eliminate them. There's no way around it. You've got to get rid of them. Limit exposure to situations that impact you adversely, whether that's too much electromagnetic field or being around people that drain your energy. Create a bliss list. We've talked about that a lot on the program. Do what you love. Do some of what you love every single day. And, you know, whether it's snuggling in with the dog, or playing beautiful music, or watching something funny, or being with people that are wonderful in your life, you've got to create the things that fill you up as a person. Discover your life purpose. We've talked about that a lot today. It's absolutely crucial. You cannot get away. And even if you're retiring, it doesn't mean you have to go out and get a job. It means get involved in something that really is you're passionate about. You can, even be involved in a charity or something that you love to make a difference. So we all need to feel needed and have a purpose. And the other thing, and this is where full recovery, there's a question on here about recovery. Full recovery to us is 1 whole year, completely symptom-free, with complete understanding and conviction that you will never go back there because you've put all of this stuff in place, and that you would never compromise your well-being for absolutely anything. And a big one is learning to say no. That's one of the most important things you can do. But doing an activity that reconnects mind and body. A big part of illness is because we're trying to figure it out in our head, and our body's trying to tell us. The soul doesn't shut up. The body's trying to tell you that something in the 8 areas is not right and you need to change it. And it's doing that through the only way it knows how, to give you physical symptoms to get your attention. So the physical symptoms are your friend. And when you connect mind and body, you can make those changes, and you can trust yourself that you're moving in the right direction, but get the support you need. So I know we've run over horribly, but these are people that have relapsed. They've all been where you are now, and they are all in fabulous health and recovered. And I can go on and on and on and on and on and on. So what is it that they've done that you need to do? They've made those changes. So make sure you become part of our gallery. And I haven't got enough time to show all the pictures of the people that now are living a fantastic life, but I can tell you every one of these stories, and every single one of them has made changes in all of those 8 areas. So if you feel you need help with your recovery and you're not on our recovery program yet, then first step is to just get the 8 Essentials guide, which is on our website there, so you can download that. Loads of us have fully recovered, as well as our team are all trained in understanding these conditions inside and out. So have a look at the holistic approach to recovery and start there. Free ebook, 8 Essentials guide. If that resonates with you, then we're probably great people to help you on your recovery journey. If you want to go further, then we've got a free trial of our recovery program, and there's a link here, online multimedia program, free health profile review with a specialist practitioner like Emma, and you can understand and learn exactly where the gaps are in your recovery and what you need to do in a cohesive plan going forward. So that's available for you. So again, that's chrisseffect.com. You find everything on there, and that's our 30-day trial. Really comprehensive. And I just want to leave you with, strength does not come from winning. Your struggles develop your strengths. When you go through hardships and decide not to surrender, that is strength. So next webinar is on the 20th of April at 10:30, unless we do a date change, and we'll let you know in plenty of time. And we are dealing with what Diana was talking about earlier, where that event happens. It can be very, very normal event, like a letter arrive or a letter failing to arrive, and then how that can set you off and create those buttons getting pushed, and the layers of meaning that you're making from that. We're going to start to look at that and how you release that and move forward. Very exciting. That's my area of thrill, is all the psychology of recovery. So we know that we unearth the cause, we dissolve the symptoms. So thank you so much. I know that it's been a long webinar today, but I hope you'll agree that we've covered a lot of ground and hopefully answered as many questions as we can. I'm just going to have a look at if there's any questions on there that are burning, and we will let you have the recording. So just let me see if there's any here. So Joanne's saying, yeah, we've got lots of questions around food and intolerances and things. So again, go into the members area and look in the nutrition side, Joanne. We've got lots in there about, the best way to start for foods. And of course, talking to your nutritional therapist is going to be the key for you, because it will need to be tailored to you. We've done that one. We've done that one. Let me see. Tips for how you can afford expensive tests and treatments when you're on benefits due to being able to work for years. Well, Jeanette, there's a lot of self-testing and things that you can do, and there's a really good book called How to Keep Your Thyroid Healthy, and it's got some good home tests and things that you can do in there, and there's loads of different testing tips and things in the program as you go through. So the program was always developed just as a self-help thing for people, no matter what situation they were in financially. So we've definitely got some things in there for you, and also a good nutritional therapist will write to your GP and help you to get things done via the NHS if you're in the UK. And Felicia just saying, we're right with what we say. It's good to keep hearing about finding the kind of life that you want. That's great. Okay. Laura, Diana, it's Diana Powley who spoke soon. Yeah, just email in the office and we'll put you in contact with Diana. And does the recording get sent to email? Yes, it will be emailed out to you, Michael. Yeah, so hopefully it'll be a really good, you'll be able to sit and watch it in peace if you had a bad connection. And Leisha's saying thanks for a fab webinar. Great subject, lots of wonderful info, and getting loads of thanks for Emma and Diana for joining us today. And I, from the bottom of my heart, ladies, I know you're so busy with what you do as specialists, so I am so thrilled to have had you and your input in here today. So thank you so much. And those individual questions about glandulars and cortisol levels and all of that need to be addressed to the professionals in our team. So do go into the Facebook forum and post on there, because our practitioners go in and answer those questions in the first instance. Okay, and if you do then want to make contact with them, they're on the practitioner directory, so look them up. Okay, so thanks everybody. Have a brilliant healing month, and I will be with you in April. And thanks again to Emma and for being on today. Really appreciate it, Emma, if you're still there. And Emma was with us from Australia, so that's why she was saying evening and we're saying daytime. Thanks everyone. Have a great healing month, as I say, and be with you soon. Bye.